Back in January of 2023, 4 friends and I rented an Airbnb outside Breckenridge, Colorado for a long ski weekend. The listing looked perfect. Big log cabin, mountain views, fireplace, hot tub. The host had great reviews, and the place was booked almost year-round. Nothing about it raised any red flags. The drive up took longer than expected because of the snow. By the time we got there, it was already dark. The cabin sat near the end of a narrow road that wound through dense pine trees. There were no street lights, no nearby traffic, just snowbanks, woods, and mountain darkness. The nearest house we could see was hundreds of yards away. Check-in was easy. Keypad on the front door. Everything inside matched the photos. The only thing that stood out was a printed notice taped beside the refrigerator. Basement not accessible to guests. Please do not attempt to enter. Nobody thought much of it. Lots of vacation rentals have locked storage rooms. The basement door was just off the kitchen. Heavy wood door. Deadbolt. Padlock. Honestly, it looked more secure than the front entrance. One of my friends joked that somebody was chained up down there. Everybody laughed. That was pretty much the last time we thought about it. At least for a day. The first night was completely normal. The second night wasn't. I woke up sometime around 2:45 in the morning. The cabin was quiet. I could hear wind pushing against the exterior walls, and the occasional creak from the wood settling in the cold. I was about to roll over and go back to sleep when I heard a sound beneath me. Not outside, not upstairs, directly below the floor. I stayed still. A few seconds later, I heard what sounded like footsteps moving somewhere underneath the cabin. I listened for maybe 20 seconds before everything stopped. Complete silence. No more footsteps. No more movement. I eventually convinced myself it was the furnace or pipes and went back to sleep. The next morning, I mentioned it over breakfast. Before I even finished explaining, my friend Jake looked up and said he'd heard it too. Then Tyler said he'd been awake around the same time. That got my attention. 3 people hearing the same thing felt different. Still, we shrugged it off. Old cabin, mountain weather. There were probably a dozen reasonable explanations. We spent the day skiing and didn't think about it again until that night. Around midnight, we were sitting in the living room watching a playoff game. The kitchen was behind us. At some point, I got up to grab another drink. As I crossed the room, I heard something below the floor. A faint scrape. I stopped. The sound stopped too. I stood there for several seconds. Nothing. When I started walking again, another scrape followed from somewhere underneath the kitchen. I remember looking down at the floor without really understanding why. The noise stopped the second I stopped moving. I didn't mention it. Not then. But a little later, Tyler got up and walked into the kitchen. Almost immediately, another sound came from below. A dull bump. Then silence. The second he walked back into the living room, we heard it again. That's when everyone noticed. The sound seemed to happen whenever somebody was moving around upstairs. As soon as the cabin got quiet, they stopped. Nobody said much after that. The atmosphere changed. The game was still on, but nobody was really watching it anymore. Then came the metallic bang. Loud enough that everyone jumped. It sounded like somebody had dropped a heavy tool onto concrete directly beneath us. The room went silent. Every head turned toward the kitchen, toward the basement door. A few seconds passed. Then we heard something dragging. Not fast, slow, like metal being pulled across a rough floor. The sound lasted several seconds, then stopped. Nobody laughed this time. I messaged the host. No response. A few minutes later, another scrape came from below. Longer than before. Intentional. That was the word that kept coming to mind. Intentional. Eventually the noises stopped. The next morning the host finally responded. He claimed the basement was unfinished, and temperature changes sometimes caused strange sounds. It wasn't a great explanation, but it was enough for us to accept it, at least temporarily. That night was our last night there. Around 3 in the morning, Tyler started pounding on bedroom doors. When I opened mine, he looked genuinely rattled. Not joking, not messing around, actually scared. He said he'd gone downstairs for water and noticed something wrong with the basement door. We all followed him into the kitchen. The padlock was hanging open, not broken, not cut, unlocked. For a second, nobody said anything. The deadbolt was still engaged, but the padlock that had been locked since we arrived was now dangling from the latch. My first thought was that we'd somehow missed it the entire trip. Then Tyler pulled out his phone. The night we arrived, he'd taken a Snapchat photo of the kitchen. The basement door was visible in the background. The padlock was clearly closed. Now it wasn't. Nobody wanted to touch it. Nobody wanted to open the door. But nobody wanted to go back to sleep either. We called the sheriff's office. like he expected to find a group of vacationers freaking out over a maintenance issue. He started by looking at the lock, then the deadbolt. Then he asked each of us when we'd last seen the door, who had been downstairs, whether anybody had touched it. The more he looked at it, the more serious he seemed to become. Eventually, he unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. A narrow staircase disappeared into darkness. The deputy drew his flashlight and went down first. We stayed at the top. For a while, all we could hear was the sound of his boots moving below us. Then silence. Then another few steps. Then silence again. The wait felt endless. Finally, he called up to us. "Stay where you are." A few more minutes passed. Then he came back up and asked if one of us could turn on the exterior lights around the back of the property. That was the moment my stomach dropped. Because it meant he was looking for someone, not something. Someone. A second deputy arrived about 20 minutes later. Only after they cleared the basement did they let us come down. The smell hit first. Not mold, not storage, human. The basement wasn't empty. There was a mattress in one corner, blankets, food wrappers, water bottles, portable battery packs, a folding chair facing a small opening between floor joists overhead. From that chair, someone could look up through the gaps and hear nearly everything happening in the kitchen. One of the deputies found a concealed access point behind the cabin hidden by stacked firewood and snow. It connected to part of the crawl space and eventually led into the basement. The person living there had never needed to use the basement door. They had their own entrance. But the thing that really bothered everyone came afterward. One deputy picked up a disposable coffee cup sitting beside the mattress. He paused, touched the side of it, then looked at the other deputy. The coffee inside was still warm. Not hot, but warm. Nobody said anything for a moment. The deputy simply set the cup back down. That meant whoever had been staying there hadn't left days ago, or even the night before. They'd been there recently, very recently. The deputies searched the woods until sunrise. They never found anyone. No arrest was ever made while we were involved. We packed our things and left that morning. As we pulled out of the driveway, I looked back one last time. 2 deputies were still behind the cabin near the hidden entrance. Fresh snow covered almost everything, except for a single set of footprints leading out of the trees. One trail, one person. The tracks stopped at the road, and from where I sat in the passenger seat, it looked like they were facing the cabin. My girlfriend Emma and I booked an Airbnb outside Sedona for a long weekend a few years ago. It wasn't some luxury desert retreat, just a detached guest house on a larger property, tucked against the red rocks about 20 minutes outside town. The listing had dozens of positive reviews. The photos looked exactly like what we wanted. Quiet, private, and isolated enough to escape the crowds. The host seemed friendly during messaging. The last thing he sent before we arrived was, "Check yourself in. I won't be on the property during your stay. The entire place is yours." Honestly, that was a selling point. Neither of us liked awkward interactions with hosts. We got there around 6 in the evening. The property consisted of a larger main house and a smaller guest house about 60 yards away. The main house looked dark and empty when we arrived. No cars in the driveway, no lights on. The guest house was exactly as advertised. The first night was completely normal. The second day was when the feeling started. Not fear, just the feeling that somebody was paying attention. Around noon, Emma and I were sitting in the living room looking through hiking trails on our phones. The living room had a large picture window facing the main house. At one point I happened to glance outside. I thought I saw movement behind a curtain in one of the main house windows. Just a slight shift, like someone had stepped away. When I looked again, nothing was there. A few minutes later my phone buzzed. A message from the host. "Looks like you're making the most of the living room." I stared at it. Emma noticed my expression immediately. "What?" I handed her my phone. We both laughed at first. Not because it was funny, because it was weird enough that neither of us knew how else to react. I replied with a thumbs up. The host never responded. An hour later we left for lunch. The only restaurant nearby was a small diner attached to a gas station. Nothing memorable. When we returned to the Airbnb, another message was waiting. "Hope you found something better than the gas station place." This time neither of us laughed. I remember looking out toward the main house. Still no vehicles. Still looked empty, but now I was paying attention. That evening, while sitting on the patio, I noticed a dark pickup truck parked near a shed behind the main house. I hadn't seen it earlier. I pointed it out to Emma. When we checked again 30 minutes later, it was gone. Neither of us had heard it start. Neither of us had heard it leave. The property was quiet enough that we should have. That night we tried convincing ourselves there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe he lived nearby. Maybe he occasionally checked security cameras. Maybe he'd simply seen our car. Everything felt explainable when discussed individually. The problem was all of it together. Around 11 that night, my phone buzzed again. The message contained only one sentence. The bedroom window should stay closed after dark. That was it. No greeting, no explanation, nothing. Emma immediately sat up. The bedroom window was behind us. I walked over and checked it. It was open about 2 inches. Not enough to notice from across the room. Just cracked. I honestly couldn't remember opening it. Emma thought she might have opened it earlier for fresh air. Neither of us knew for sure. I messaged the host back. Why does the window need to stay closed? No response. 10 minutes passed. Nothing. Then 20. Nothing. Outside, the property was completely dark. The main house looked empty. No lights. No movement. Just black windows. I eventually locked the bedroom window and pulled the curtains shut. That's when another text arrived. Thank you. I felt my stomach drop. Because if he wasn't watching us, how did he know we'd just closed it? Emma saw my face before I even handed her the phone. Neither of us slept well after that. At around 2 in the morning, I woke up needing water. As I walked through the living room, I noticed something outside. A faint light, up near the main house. One window was glowing dimly, not enough to illuminate the room. Just enough to suggest someone was inside, watching. The next morning we decided to leave early. Not because we thought we were in danger. We were simply uncomfortable. Before packing, I started inspecting the property. I checked smoke detectors, power outlets, air vents, bookshelves. Anywhere people online always claim hidden cameras are concealed. I found nothing. Then I walked outside. I wanted one last look around before we left. That's when I noticed the security cameras mounted on the main house. There were several of them. Most appeared normal. One faced the driveway. One covered the front entrance. But one camera immediately caught my attention. It was mounted beneath the roofline on the side facing the guest house. And it wasn't aimed at any entrance. It wasn't aimed at the parking area. It was pointed directly at the large living room window. I stepped sideways. The camera followed the exact line of sight into the room. I moved farther out. Same thing. There was no ambiguity. That camera's view included almost the entire living room. I took photographs from multiple angles. Then I noticed something else. The bedroom. The room where we'd received the text about the open window. Another camera was mounted lower on the corner of the main house. Its field of view appeared to extend directly toward that side of the guest house. Toward the bedroom windows. I photographed that too. When we got in the car, I opened the Airbnb listing. The listing disclosed exterior security cameras. That part wasn't unusual, but the description specifically stated the cameras monitored the driveway and entrances. Nothing about windows. Nothing about guest living spaces. While driving home, I contacted Airbnb support. I sent every photo. The representative agreed the angles looked questionable and escalated the complaint. A few days later, Airbnb contacted me again requesting additional information. The host had responded. According to him, the cameras were strictly for property security. He claimed the angles only appeared suspicious because of perspective distortion. Maybe that explanation would have worked. Except there was one detail I hadn't mentioned to Airbnb yet. Something I discovered while rereading the listing. The reviews. Most were normal. 5 stars, compliments. Then I found a review from nearly a year earlier. It had only 4 stars. Buried in the middle of an otherwise positive review was a single sentence. Host always seemed to know when we were around the property. That sentence bothered me enough to contact the reviewer through Airbnb's messaging system. I didn't expect a response, but I got one. 2 days later, the reviewer told me they had received strange messages too. Nothing threatening, just comments about things they'd been doing. Things they never mentioned to the host. The reviewer said it made them uncomfortable enough that they never returned. Airbnb eventually informed me they were handling the matter internally. They never provided details. The listing disappeared a few weeks later. Maybe it was removed. Maybe the host removed it himself. I never found out. What stayed with me wasn't the camera. It wasn't the messages either. It was something I noticed while reviewing the photos one last time months later. In one of the pictures I had taken of the camera facing the guest house, the living room window reflected part of the main house. At first glance it looked normal. Just glare, desert sunlight. But after zooming in, I noticed a face behind the curtain of an upstairs window. Not pressed against the glass. Not peeking dramatically. Just standing there, partially hidden, looking directly toward the guest house. Toward where Emma and I had spent 2 nights believing the property was empty. And once I saw it, I couldn't stop thinking about something. The timestamp on that photograph, It had been taken less than 3 minutes after the host sent the message thanking us for closing the bedroom window.